Welcome to Pillowtime lore, my dear ones. Tell me, when was the last time you truly paused, not to check your phone, not to plan the next day, but to simply be? The world rushes by so quickly, doesn't it? Always asking for more, always pulling you in 1,000 different directions, until you almost forget what quiet feels like. But tonight, here, in this little corner we've made together, you don't need to rush. You don't need to do anything except rest and listen. Do you remember how it felt when you were a child, tucked safely under your blanket? When someone sat beside you and whispered stories that felt like spells? Maybe their voice turned an ordinary night into something magical. The shadows became kingdoms. The breeze outside became a lullaby, and your dreams felt endless and bright. That magic never truly left you, my dear. It's been waiting quietly, deep inside your heart, and tonight we'll bring it back. So, what kind of story does your soul crave tonight? A sweet, gentle tale to soothe your mind, a little adventure to make your heart race, or perhaps a soft reminder that no matter how messy the day was, you are safe, you are loved, and you are not alone. Pull your blanket closer, take a slow, deep breath, and let your worries slip away with every exhale tonight. You and I will travel to a place where the world grows quiet and dreams are free to wander. Welcome to Pillowtime lore, where every night holds a story, and every story brings you home. Let me tell you about a little place not far from here. A place most folks don't talk about much anymore. On the top of a quiet hill, there sits an old house. Its windows like watchful eyes looking over the village below. People pass by and whisper about it. Some say it's haunted. Others say it's cursed. But truth be told, no one really knows what's gone on inside those walls. They only know it has been standing there for longer than anyone can remember. Now, in this village, lives a young girl named Nora. Curious as a cat and braver than she realizes. She's got that restless kind of spirit, the sort that sees stories where others see only silence. While most people keep their distance from the old house, Nora feels drawn to it, as if the wind itself is calling her name every time she walks past. She's the kind of soul who believes there's always more to a story than what folks tell. This is a tale of courage and of secrets, of how sometimes the quietest voices carry the deepest truths. It's not a story about ghosts or curses. No, it's about love, loss, and the things people do to protect what matters most. So settle in, dear one, and listen close. For what you're about to hear isn't just about an old house on a hill. It's about a girl, a mystery, and the way a single act of kindness can change everything. Nora had never seen a village so quiet, the kind where mornings felt like whispers from another time and the air carried the scent of earth and wildflowers. She stepped out of the small car her parents had rented, her shoes crunching softly on the cobbled street. Cottages with tiled roofs leaned gently toward each other, like old friends sharing secrets. Green fields stretched endlessly toward the horizon, glowing under the pale light of dawn. Everything felt so different from the rushing city she had left behind, where life was a blur of noise, traffic, and neon lights. Now there was only stillness, and in that stillness, a strange sense of possibility. She had grown up in a world where there was never enough time, where conversations were brief and hurried, her parents always working, her friends caught up in their own chaos. Nora often felt like a shadow passing through her own life, unseen and unheard, standing in this quiet village. She wondered if perhaps this was her chance to finally breathe, to discover who she truly was, without the constant buzz of city life drowning her thoughts. As she walked with her parents down the narrow main street, she noticed the villagers gathered in small groups, their voices low and careful, their smiles polite but tinged with something unspoken, like a shared secret they would not easily reveal. She caught fragments of their conversations about an old house that sat high on a hill, watching over the village like a silent sentinel. Some said it was haunted, others refused to speak of it at all. Yet, even in their avoidance, Nora sensed a deep reverence, as if the house was more than just wood and stone, as if it was alive with memories too heavy to name. That evening, she sat by her bedroom window, her suitcase still half unpacked, the hill visible in the distance. The house, a dark silhouette against the violet sky. The world seemed to hold its breath as twilight deepened. And then she saw it, a thin ribbon of smoke rising from the chimney, curling upward like a whisper she could almost hear. Her heart raced, because abandoned houses did not breathe like that. Questions flooded her mind, sharp and insistent. Why would there be firelight in a place left for ruin? And why did the sight of it stir something deep in her chest as the moon climbed high? Nora realized she was no longer just curious, she was connected, drawn by a mystery that felt strangely personal, and she knew she would have to climb that hill, no matter what waited for her at the top. The morning sunlight spilled over the rooftops like a golden tide, filling the narrow streets with warmth and quiet life. The village seemed to wake slowly, with soft clinking sounds of shopkeepers arranging their goods and the gentle chatter of neighbors greeting one another. Nora carried a small basket as she walked toward the row of shops near the square, her steps light but her heart heavy with questions. The image of the smoke rising from the hill house still fresh in her mind. She needed answers, and she needed them now. She approached a group of women gathered by the old stone well, their voices mingling like the ripples of water below, trying to sound casual. She asked if they had noticed anything strange near the hill the night before. One woman laughed, a quick, almost nervous laugh, and said it must have been fog or Nora's imagination playing tricks on her. Another woman avoided Nora's gaze entirely and quickly changed the subject, speaking about bread prices and weather, her hands wringing the edge of her apron. There was a tension beneath their words, a weight Nora could feel but not name, frustrated but not ready to give up. Nora wandered to the small bakery tucked in the corner of the square, its warm, yeasty air wrapping around her like a blanket. Behind the counter stood the old shopkeeper, his white hair curling gently above kind yet weary eyes. Nora told him about the smoke, her voice quiet but determined. His expression changed, the warmth in his face replaced by something somber. He leaned closer and lowered his voice, saying some places were best left alone, that not every question needed an answer. His tone carried the weight of experience, as though he had seen what happened to those who ignored such warnings. Nora left the bakery with her basket still nearly empty but her mind overflowing. She thought about how adults often hid the truth from children, not to protect them, but because they feared what might happen if the truth came out. The villagers were not just avoiding the topic. They were guarding it, perhaps out of fear. As she walked home through the winding lanes, her eyes kept drifting toward the hill, the house looming in the distance like a shadow from another world. She realized that mystery had a way of calling to her, and no warning, no matter how serious, could quiet that call. Deep inside, she knew some answers change you forever, yet she could not live in silence. She promised herself she would go to that house and face whatever waited for her there, even if it meant uncovering something the village wanted to keep buried. Nora set out early in the morning, the cool breeze brushing against her cheeks and carrying with it the smell of dew-soaked grass. Her small backpack bounced lightly against her shoulders as she walked toward the base of the hill. Her parents had told her countless times to stay close to home, to keep herself safe. Yet there was something about that hill and the mysterious house that called to her like a quiet voice. Some mysteries are like that. They live in the corners of our minds and refuse to fade. Every step she took was a mixture of fear and wonder, like walking toward a truth she wasn't sure she was ready to face. The winding path was narrow and uneven, wild bushes crowding in on both sides, their branches tangling like hands reaching out to hold her back. Nora pushed forward, her heart beating faster with each step. She thought about how, in the city, the paths had always been clear and straightforward. Here, in the countryside, life felt different, messy, and filled with questions that didn't have easy answers. She wondered if maybe this climb was more than just about the house. Maybe it was about proving to herself that she was brave enough to seek what others turned away from. As she climbed higher, the sun began to rise behind her, painting the fields below in shades of gold and green. Nora paused for a moment to catch her breath, and that's when she heard it, a soft humming, faint but haunting, like a lullaby carried on the wind. She froze, her eyes scanning the trees and shadows, but there was no one there. The sound seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, filling her chest with both dread. It was the kind of sound that makes you question whether it was real or just your mind playing tricks. Yet deep down, she felt it was a sign, a whisper telling her to keep going. Finally, after what felt like hours, she reached the top of the hill, her breath catching at the sight before her. The house stood tall and quiet, its faded brick walls weathered by time yet strong, the windows gleaming softly in the morning light. And along the front steps were rows of fresh flowers, carefully tended as if by loving hands. Nora's heart raced as she stepped forward. The wooden door creaked loudly as she pushed it open, and the scent of warm wood and earth washed over her. As she crossed the threshold, it felt like stepping into another world, one where the past and present were woven together, and every corner held a story waiting to be told. Nora stepped fully inside the house, and a wave of disbelief and wonder washed over her. She had expected cobwebs, dust, and decay, the kind of emptiness that comes with years of abandonment. But instead, she was greeted by warmth and life. The wooden floor gleamed as though it had been polished recently, and the furniture was carefully arranged, not a chair out of place. The air carried the comforting aroma of soup simmering somewhere in the kitchen, mixed with the sweet scent of freshly baked bread resting on the table. It felt almost as if the house had been waiting for her. Her gaze swept across the walls, taking in the paintings that hung perfectly straight and the curtains that were drawn neatly to let in soft morning light. It didn't feel like a ruin. It felt like a home still loved and cared for, which made no sense. The villagers had spoken of this house like it was cursed, a place no one dared to enter, and yet here she stood, surrounded by signs of life. Confusion swirled in her chest. Mingling with a strange sense of awe, she moved slowly, whispering a soft hello into the silence, her voice barely more than a breath, hoping someone might answer. But the only reply was the faint creak of the floorboards beneath her feet. Every corner of the house seemed to hum with quiet energy, as though someone had just stepped out moments before she arrived. When she entered the sitting room, her eyes caught a rocking chair swaying ever so slightly, its rhythmic motion sending a chill racing down her spine. She couldn't tell if it had been moved by a draft or something far more unsettling. As she explored, Nora couldn't help but think of her own life. The move to this village had felt like stepping away from everything familiar, leaving behind friends and the loud chaos of the city. She had thought this place would be simple and quiet, yet here she was, standing in a mystery bigger than anything she could have imagined. Sometimes, she thought, the places that seem most ordinary are the ones holding the deepest secrets. Curiosity drove her up the narrow staircase, her fingers grazing the smooth wood of the railing. The attic was dim but surprisingly tidy, filled with neatly stacked boxes and shelves lined with carefully placed objects. In the far corner, she spotted a small chest secured with an old rusty lock. Kneeling beside it, she ran her hands over its surface, wondering what stories it held. The key was nowhere in sight, and a quiet determination filled her heart. She didn't have answers yet, but she knew she would return. Some truths, she realized, wait patiently to be discovered, and this house was full of them. The next morning, Nora woke before the first call of the birds, her heart fluttering with both excitement and unease. She moved quietly through the house, careful not to wake her parents, who believed the hill was no place for a young girl. Her mother always said curiosity was like fire. It could keep you warm or burn you alive. But Nora couldn't help herself. There was something about that house that felt like it was calling her, whispering secrets only she could hear. The path to the hill was cloaked in early morning mist, the kind that makes the world feel hushed and hidden. The sun was just beginning to rise, stretching long shadows across the fields. Each step Nora took felt heavier than the last, as if the earth itself was warning her to turn back. But the thrill of discovery pushed her forward. Her breath quickened, and she felt the strange mix of fear and wonder that comes with walking into the unknown. When she reached the house and pushed open the door, the familiar warm scent of bread and flowers greeted her. Yet this time, something felt different. The air seemed charged, expectant, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. On the kitchen table lay a small, folded note, perfectly placed and waiting for her. Her hands trembled as she unfolded it. The handwriting was careful and looping, almost gentle. It read, "You don't need to be afraid." Nora's heart skipped a beat. The words felt both comforting and haunting. Someone had been here. Someone knew she would return. She moved through the rooms with cautious steps, every creak of the floorboards sounding louder than before. Her mind buzzed with questions. Who lived here, and why hide? Her parents often told her that people hide truths for many reasons. Sometimes to protect others, sometimes to protect themselves. Nora wasn't sure which this was. As she climbed the staircase, she heard it, faint footsteps above her, slow and deliberate. Her breath caught, and her pulse thundered in her ears. When she reached the attic, it was empty. Only the soft light of morning filtering through the dusty window. But there, tucked carefully under a flower pot, was another note. This one read, "Please don't tell anyone." Nora stood frozen, clutching the slip of paper. A chill ran through her, yet, alongside it came an odd sense of connection. The realization that this was no ordinary house. It was a place full of hidden stories and silent voices, and somehow she had been chosen to hear them. Sometimes, she thought, the biggest secrets, they reveal themselves only to those willing to listen, and she was ready to listen, even if the truth frightened her. Determined to uncover the truth that had been tugging at her heart for days, Nora rose before dawn while the village still slept beneath a blanket of golden mist. She slipped out quietly, her parents unaware, their soft breathing fading behind her as she stepped into the cool morning air. The hill loomed in the distance, wrapped in a hush that felt sacred. The dew clung to the grass like tiny shards of glass, each step crunching softly beneath her feet. Her heart thudded with a rhythm that matched her breath, excitement mingling with a fear she could not name. She had been waiting for this moment, longing to finally discover who had been leaving the notes. As she climbed higher, the sky began to blush with the first light of day. She thought of her life before the village, the crowded city streets, the endless noise, the feeling of always being surrounded yet never truly seen. Here, everything felt different, slower, quieter, like the earth itself was whispering for her to listen. She wondered if maybe she had been sent here not by chance, but for a reason. Her mother once told her that sometimes, when the world grows too loud, life pushes you toward silence so you can hear what truly matters. The memory of those words carried her up the final stretch of the hill. Peering through a dusty window, Nora's breath caught in her throat. There, in the garden, was a figure moving with grace. A woman with her face hidden beneath a delicate scarf that fluttered in the soft breeze. The sight made Nora's pulse quicken. The woman's hands moved tenderly as she arranged the flowers and watered each plant, almost as if she was speaking to them in a language only they understood. There was something deeply human and achingly lonely in the way she moved, a kind of care that only comes from a soul that has known both love and loss. Nora couldn't resist. She ran outside, her voice trembling as she called, "Hello." The single word hung in the air like a fragile thread. The woman froze, and in the blink of an eye, she was gone, swallowed by the morning mist, leaving only the rustling of leaves and the sweet scent of blossoms. Nora stood frozen, breathless, wondering if she had imagined it all. As she walked slowly toward the flower beds, her eyes caught a glimmer beneath a clay pot. She knelt and carefully lifted it to find a small folded note. Her hands shook as she opened it and read, "Thank you for your kindness." Warmth bloomed in her chest, chasing away her fear. This was no ghost story, no haunting. Someone was here, living quietly, watching her from the shadows. And for the first time, Nora felt chosen, as though she had been trusted with a secret meant only for her. And she knew she would not rest until she understood the story behind it all. That evening, as the sun dipped low and bathed the village in hues of amber and rose, Nora sat across from her grandfather at the small wooden table, the faint scent of stew lingering in the air, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She told him everything she had witnessed, the smoke rising from the chimney when the house was said to be empty, the carefully folded notes left behind like whispers from an unseen hand, and most of all, the mysterious woman in the garden whose presence felt as fleeting as a dream. Her voice trembled as she spoke, afraid he might dismiss it all as childish imagination. Yet desperate for him to understand, her grandfather listened in silence, his weathered face still and unreadable. But when she finished, a shadow of worry crossed his eyes. He leaned back in his chair with a heavy sigh, the kind that seemed to carry years of unspoken memories. His voice, when he finally spoke, was gentle but carried a weight Nora had never heard before. He warned her that some truths were like fire, beautiful from a distance, yet dangerous to touch. He said there were secrets in this world that thrived in darkness, because bringing them into the light could hurt more than heal. His words made Nora's chest tighten, for she sensed he was not just speaking of the house, but of life itself. He hesitated, then told her a story, his tone soft and almost reverent. He spoke of the family who had once lived in the house on the hill, a family known for their generosity, always helping those in need when the winters were harsh and food was scarce. They were the kind of people whose kindness left an echo long after they were gone. Yet one bitter winter night, without warning, they disappeared, their doors left unlocked, their hearth still warm, and no trace of where they had gone. The villagers searched. Whispers spread like dry leaves in the wind, but no one ever found the truth. Only a hollow silence remained. When Nora pressed for more details, her voice full of urgency, her grandfather's eyes hardened. He shook his head slowly, refusing to say another word, urging her to stay away from the hill, to let the past remain buried where it belonged. But his caution only fueled the storm rising inside her. Nora had always been curious, always the girl who needed to understand the why behind the world. And now, with her grandfather's unease hanging heavy in the room, her determination sharpened into something unshakable. She knew she could not turn away, for some mysteries call to the soul so deeply that to ignore them feels like turning away from who you truly are. And this was one of those mysteries, one she was meant to unravel no matter the cost. On her next visit to the house, Nora climbed the familiar staircase with a strange mix of excitement and unease swirling inside her. Her breath came in quick, shallow bursts as her trembling hands gripped the railing. Each step creaked softly beneath her feet, echoing through the silent house like a whisper. She had been thinking about the small locked chest in the attic for days. It had been haunting her mind like an unanswered question, and today she had decided she would no longer leave it untouched. Her heart pounded with anticipation, for she knew that whatever was inside might finally reveal the truth about the mysterious house on the hill. The attic smelled faintly of wood and old paper, and dust motes swirled in the thin stream of sunlight breaking through a cracked window. She moved slowly, checking every corner, carefully shifting boxes and peering behind shelves. Her mind wandered to her own life as she searched, how she had always been drawn to puzzles, to hidden meanings and things others often overlooked. She thought of how her curiosity had sometimes gotten her into trouble back home, how her parents often said she asked too many questions. Yet here, in this quiet attic, her questioning nature felt like a gift, as though the house had been waiting for someone exactly like her, someone willing to see what others chose to ignore after what felt like hours of searching. Her fingers brushed against something smooth and cool tucked behind a loose floorboard. She gasped softly as she pried it open and found a tiny key lying in the shadows. Its metal glinted faintly in the dim light. Holding it felt like holding a piece of destiny. Her hands shook as she carried it to the chest, fitting it carefully into the ancient lock. With a deep breath, she turned it, and the chest creaked open with a sound that seemed to carry the weight of generations. Inside lay stacks of delicate letters, yellowed maps, and worn records, each piece carefully preserved, as though someone had known they would one day be discovered. Nora read through them slowly, her eyes widening with every line. They spoke of a family who had once lived here, a family who gave quietly without ever seeking thanks, feeding hungry villagers, paying debts, even sheltering those fleeing danger. Their kindness had been the invisible thread holding the village together through its hardest winters. As the story unfolded through the letters, Nora's heart swelled with awe, and then she realized the truth. The woman she had seen in the garden was likely the last living member of that family, watching over the home and its memories in secret. She now understood why the villagers spoke in whispers and why the notes had been left for her. She had been chosen not to expose the secret, but to protect it. Some stories, she realized, are not meant to be shouted to the world. They are meant to be safeguarded like a flame against the wind. And in that moment, Nora made a silent vow to honor the legacy of love and quiet courage that had been entrusted to her. Nora returned to the house early the next morning, her breath visible in the cool air, the garden glistening with fresh dew as if it had been sprinkled with tiny diamonds. The sun peeked over the horizon, casting a soft, golden glow that wrapped the flowers and stone pathways in warmth. She sat quietly on a low stone wall, the same place where she had waited many times before, her hands clasped together, her heart thudding with hope and a hint of fear. She had wondered all night if the mysterious woman would appear, if she would finally reveal the truth that had been hidden for so long. As the minutes passed, the garden seemed to hold its breath. Then Nora saw her, the familiar, graceful figure moving silently among the flower beds, her scarf drawn over her face, her steps light and deliberate. This time, however, the woman did not vanish when she noticed Nora. Instead, she paused, standing a few steps away, and lifted her gaze to meet Nora's. In that moment, Nora felt an invisible thread connect them. Two souls bound by a story far older than either of them. The woman began to speak, her voice gentle yet steady. She told Nora how, after her family had mysteriously disappeared, people driven by greed had come to claim the house and everything it held. They saw only value in its treasures, not in its memories or the love woven into its walls. To protect her family's legacy, the woman had chosen to stay hidden, letting the village believe the house was abandoned. She had lived in silence and shadows, guarding the truth like a fragile flame. Her eyes glimmered with sadness, but there was a quiet strength in her words. Nora listened with her whole heart, feeling a deep ache for the sacrifices the woman had made. She thought about how often the world misjudges silence, mistaking it for weakness, when in truth it can be the loudest form of courage. When the woman finished, she stepped forward and placed a small envelope in Nora's trembling hands. Her voice soft but sure as she said, "You gave me courage to finally leave." Inside the envelope was a letter, written with care, telling the full story of the family and their hopes for the future. It was more than just paper and ink. It was a legacy of kindness and love, meant to be carried forward with a final, lingering smile. The woman turned and slowly disappeared into the morning mist, leaving Nora standing alone in the glowing garden, her heart heavy yet full, knowing she now held a precious secret and the responsibility to protect it. Some stories, she realized, are not told for fame or glory, but to keep the light of goodness alive in a world that often forgets it. The next day, Nora walked slowly up the familiar winding path to the hill, the cool morning air wrapping around her like a gentle blanket. The grass beneath her shoes still damp with dew. The sun rose steadily behind her, casting long, soft shadows across the open fields, and the house came into view, standing silent and still, its windows reflecting the warm glow of the early light. To the villagers, it was just as it had always been, an old abandoned place they avoided, a relic of the past they spoke of only in hushed tones. But Nora knew better now. She knew the truth that lived within those walls, a truth that would never be spoken aloud. As she passed through the garden, her fingers brushed lightly over the flowers, each petal cool and damp, and memories of the woman filled her mind. She could almost hear the soft rustle of her scarf in the breeze, and the sound of her calm voice sharing the family's story. The letter, now tucked safely in Nora's drawer at home, felt heavier than paper. It was a weight of trust, of responsibility, of carrying forward the kind of goodness the world often forgets. She realized that some people change the world quietly, not through grand gestures or fame, but through acts of love and courage that ripple through generations. Unseen yet deeply felt, Nora paused at the edge of the hill and looked up at the house, its silhouette framed against the wide blue sky, and a small smile touched her lips. She thought about how stories are living things, passed from one heart to another, how sometimes being a keeper of a secret is more powerful than shouting the truth to the world. She thought of her own life, of how she had always felt small and unnoticed in the grander scheme of things. But now she understood that even the smallest voice could carry great meaning when it guarded something sacred. As the sun began to sink, painting the horizon in soft shades of gold and pink, Nora closed her eyes and whispered a promise to protect what she had learned, to honor the memory of the family who had given so much and asked for nothing in return. She lingered there for a long while, watching as the last glow of light faded from the hilltop house, knowing that while some stories are told, others are simply lived, and their quiet magic endures forever in the hearts of those who choose to remember.